This Epitalk All-Stars is being brought to you by MyRadar, the world's most popular radar weather app with over 35 million downloads.
Welcome to All-Stars. I am your all-star host, Charles Liu. You can call me Chuck. I'm a professor of astrophysics at the College of Staten Island, at the City University of New York, and an astrophysicist at the American Museum of Natural History. And tonight, it is my great pleasure to have with me my comedic co-host, Mr. Chuck Nice.
Hey,
Thank you
Chuck.
so much for being here, Chuck. As always, we have a good time together.
Without a doubt,
That's
I'm
right,
already
Chuck and
enjoying
Chuck.
myself.
Oh, fantastic. That was fast.
Yeah.
In this episode of All Stars, we are going to talk about, amongst other things, the brain
Nice.
and brains,
Ooh.
technology and science, communication too, with our very, very special guest. I'm very, very pleased and proud to have her with us, Dr. Kiki Sanford.
Hello.
Hi, Kiki. What a great pleasure to have her, neurophysiologist and a very, very long-time science communicator. She, I think, was on YouTube before it was even a thing.
Wow.
And it's been so long that you must have started podcasting and social media-ing science when you were like 6.
That's
because
right.
that's just
yeah.
amazing.
That was it, yeah. Right?
What you have been doing all this time is
6 and
really
a half,
great.
I'm pretty sure that was
And you've had a Twitch feed over time. You've hosted This Week in Science. You've hosted the Stem Cell podcast. So welcome, and thank you so much for coming here and bringing us your expertise. And
I hope I have expertise to share.
Trust me,
that
you
I'm,
absolutely do.
At least some interesting tidbits.
And even if you don't, people love that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? There's nothing that people love more, believe it or not, than errant information.
Yes.
They actually like that more than, like, if you're wrong about something, that is what people love the most.
Well, they love gloating over the fact that you're wrong.
That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying.
Okay.
You know?
Speaking of something that's potentially wrong, let me bring something up right away. And Kiki, I'd like your opinion on this as well. And that is, this is a fascinating visual thing, which I know doesn't necessarily have the same scientific underpinnings, but turns out to be quite stunning when you look at it. If you take a picture of the universe, a large-scale structure, say a simulation of hundreds of millions of light years across, and you look at the distribution of matter in the universe, and compare that large-scale structure with, say, an electron microscope picture of a set of neurons in the human brain, where you have the center of the neuron, the axon, and then you have the dendrites coming out of it, and the synapses that go from one cell to the other. They look really similar. It's amazing that the large-scale structure of the universe and the small-scale structure of the human brain look so alike.
Not in my brain.
Do you just have any idea why that might be the same? I have a few ideas. It has to do with mathematics and fractals and things like that.
I'm sure there are mathematical laws governing the organizational principles of emergent structures.
Right? So that's the concept. Please explain.
Nicely done.
Get deeply.
Look at Kiki.
I know.
There we go.
Obviously, this is going to be a fantastic episode.
Kiki's a gunslinger. She's just like, all right.
Let's
Tell
talk
me
about
what you
that.
got.
Yes. Could you explain a little bit further about emergent principles of something complex and then organizational structures? And in this case, you feel free to go specifically to the human brain, then we can try to knit it back to the universe and large-scale structure.
Yeah. So, in science, there's, at least in neuroscience, there's this way of being that's very reductionist, right?
Okay.
So you look at the brain, and if you take the brain out of any organism, say a human, it looks like a pink blob of jello. It's gooey,
Now I'm
ooey.
hungry.
And there's
Okay, zombie Chuck.
I was gonna say,
Where to go? Yeah.
Do you have a recipe with that? Because I am really hungry now.
it's hard to imagine, though, that this blob of jello
Right.
could actually be capable of all of the behaviors that humans are capable of,
Totally,
right? And so
totally.
then you start getting into it, right? Dig into it. You can slice it up. You can stain it. You can look at structures within it. And there are what we call nuclei within the brain, which are particular areas of the brain that have been identified as being used by the brain for certain purposes. And then you go even deeper, and within those nuclei, there are individual neurons that are connecting to each other with these dendrites and the axons. And then there are other cells that are used to support the neurons in what they do. They're used for short distance signaling and for immune function.
So really, it gets super
and there are
complicated.
all these little tiny tidbits inside of the brain that if you start at the lowest level, they could not be responsible for everything on their own.
Right.
But it is the emergent property of all of them acting in synchrony
I see.
that
That makes it
allows
happen.
that makes it happen.
Right.
That
Makes
makes
a
that
lot of
blob
sense.
of jello
Makes that blob of Jell-O
amazing.
Right.
Fantastic. So let's talk about your blob of Jello, if we may. Yeah, tell us a little bit about how you've come to this place, your journey through science and through where you are today. That's really fascinating to all of us to know how we all got to this point, and especially you who have such a long history in this field.
So I came to where I am today because of an interest in birds.
Oh,
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, while I was an undergraduate, I went away to a summer program. It's a lab in the mountains, the Rocky Mountain Biological
Nice.
Laboratory.
Rumble,
Rumble.
right?
Yeah. And I
Yeah.
spent a summer at Rumble that was amazing. And I went traipsing through the mountains, hunting after birds, listening to their calls, and was so fascinated. That's right. So fascinated by these avian
Not
beings.
bad, Charles.
Love that. I went back to my university and I looked for a researcher that did bird research.
Wait, I don't want to embarrass you too much,
Yeah.
but you didn't say the name of your university.
University of California at Davis.
Ooh,
Nice
okay.
place.
Yes, it was. It's a very nice
Yeah.
place. And so I found a laboratory run by a woman named Nicola Clayton,
Okay.
and she was a new university professor there. She came from Cambridge, and she was doing bird memory research.
Interesting.
So I went from field biologist looking at birds in the wild to suddenly going, oh, I get to work with birds. Oh, and we're going to look at this really interesting question of how the birds
How they remember. Right.
how they remember where they hide their food
Right.
to survive for the
Wow.
winter, how they remember where they're going to go when they're migrating.
Mm-hmm.
How do they do this? And so these were the questions she was looking into.
So let me
and
ask.
so bird brain.
Bird brains.
Yes.
Bird brains. So do bird brains offer any similarities to our brains? Like, do they have and when you talk about memory, do they have like a hippocampus
They
the
have
same
a
way we do? And
Yes. So the bird brain it is differently structured.
Right.
So the hippocampus in the mammalian brain is like if you were to put a pencil between your ears,
Right.
it's like right in the
there.
middle.
Ow!
Right
no,
in the
no,
middle
Right in
in
the
there.
Ow! Ow! I'm going to try to forget that.
But in birds, the hippocampus sits right on top.
right on top.
Yeah. And so it's as if the brain is opened up instead of curved in on itself.
So cool.
Bird brains don't have the folding.
Okay, right.
So they
Right.
don't have that external cortex
Oh.
that the human brain or the mammalian brain has. But so the hippocampus is right on top. And researchers looking at the structure of the hippocampus in birds and humans have found that they share a structural similarity in that they call it the trisynaptic pathway. So there are basically three synapses,
Right.
three different neurons that are connecting to each other through the hippocampus, through the
Wow.
dentate gyrus into the various parts of the hippocampus and then out. And the avian hippocampus is the same. It doesn't look the same. It's not wrapped up like a
Right.
seahorse,
Right.
Where the name hippocampus came from.
Confirms, right.
But
Oh, wow.
it has that trisynaptic pathway.
I see. Do
and
they have like
information flows through it in the same way.
Do they have like a hippopotamus instead of hippocampus or anything like that?
No.
Okay. Hippogriff, perhaps?
Although I will say that the brain of a zebrafinch resembles a garbanzo bean.
Nice. Okay.
So why aren't they called
Once again,
garbanzo
I'm starving.
No,
Let
that's
me tell you, me and science always goes
I
back
love
to
it.
the food.
Yeah,
I love
How
it.
can I relate
How
it to
could I
something
relate
you
this?
eat?
I love it.
That's great. So the story goes on from there. You decided to do memory in birds, and
Yes.
that went on into your doctoral work. Is that basically how it went?
Yeah.
Did you
so
stay?
I stayed in her lab
Uh-huh.
and I finished undergraduate, loved what she was working on, and applied to the PhD program
Mm-hmm.
there. Started the PhD program, and I got my doctorate in bird brains.
Terrific.
Lovely.
And that was about.
So wait. I'm just curious.
Okay.
What what do you write a dissertation on when it comes to bird brains?
You exactly were about to ask my question, but
Really?
more funny than me. I was about to ask her, yes.
Like, what is the bird brain dissertation that makes you a doctor?
Yeah. So the learning and memory in the migrant and nomadic avian brain.
Actually, that's
Ooh.
I have to tell you something. Even the title is pretty fascinating.
That's awesome.
Only because they're migrant birds, so it's like they got to remember how to get where they're going and how they.
Yeah.
So did you do vagrancy as well? Like,
okay, Chuck,
I may have had periods of my life like that when I was in grad school, for instance. But
I can't help it. I'm just a crow that's down on my luck. All right. I'm sure I'm going to get it together. Speaking of crows.
Yeah, I love crows.
Yeah.
Amazingly smart birds.
I've been doing a little reading about their cleverness.
Very clever.
And their ability to improvise.
Yes. And
so can you talk a little bit about what makes them so different that these birds can do the things that they do? And the fact that they use tools as well.
And that they use tools.
Wow.
So the New Caledonian crow is the species of crow that a lot of this research has been coming out from recently with the improvisation and the tool making.
And for those of us who don't know where New Caledonia is,
right,
it's in
that's
the
the
South.
Old Caledonia.
No, Old Caledonia is in Scotland.
I'm sorry, that's an old
New Caledonia is in South Pacific,
right.
South Pacific Ocean. Okay.
Yes.
Kind of like Galapagos, but like less well known.
Sweet.
Yeah.
Good for you.
And so these birds, they are one of the things that we think is the reason that they are capable of these feats is that they're very social.
Oh.
And it's the sociality of the animals that we think is linked to higher intelligence. It's interesting to note that, say, these crows are some of the most intelligent of the passerines, which are the songbirds, and their brain is a songbird brain. So zebrafinch brain looks like the crow brain, except the crow brain is bigger.
So like two garbanzo beans.
More like a walnut. and then
pretty soon we're going to have a salad.
That's right. And then there are parrots, which are the other really smart birds, and their brain is even structured slightly differently because they're Aucenes. They're a little off-branching.
Wow.
Right.
Slightly related to the passerines, but not.
Very cool.
So that's a little bit of different brain structures going on there. So the New Caledonian crows, we think it's their social behaviors that they learn and they teach, and that there is information processing happening at a higher level.
Fantastic. We will definitely get back to more of this science in a few minutes. But right now, Chuck, it is time for us to go to our first cosmic queries.
Woo!
All right, let us do it. Let's,
Okay.
of course, we take inquiries from all across the internet, wherever there is an incarnation of Star Talk. And let's go right now to Sabai Mihalak. I think that might be it. Sabai or Sebi, if I'd said it wrong, change your name.
Chuck will buy you a garbanzo.
Yeah, we'll
salad.
buy you a salad. Okay, there we go. She's coming to us from Facebook. Says, what do you think is the best type of education and what can parents do to help? So
perfect segue from teaching crows.
Teaching crows, or crows who are social enough to learn
Crows
from one
who know
another.
how to count, right? So they're counting
Counting
crows,
crows.
too.
Counting crows.
Yeah,
That's an okay band.
Yeah. Those crows don't come around here very often.
Counting mathematicians are an even worse band, though.
here.
Seriously.
Nice. You caught that. Well, all right.
But that's a good question, right? I mean, are there lessons that we can learn from the animal kingdom in terms of our educating our children?
Yeah, well, one of the things that you watch any young child, any young animal, they try things out and they get it wrong.
Yep.
And then they try again and they get it wrong. And there's a lot of getting things wrong before things are gotten right.
Yes.
And so the process of iteration, the process of failure and figuring out what went wrong in order to try again and do it differently and better. And also something that, I mean, going beyond animals necessarily, but into curiosity,
Mm-hmm.
as opposed to rote learning. I mean, we all have to, at one point, just memorize the multiplication tables, right?
You got to get it.
There's some basic
But there
information.
is curiosity that you can pass on as to how numbers work with each other and how they help to describe the universe. And if you get that curiosity spark into kids, then they
That
will
is
always
so important.
learn.
That is so interesting
So-
because, we have a situation and I may even be guilty of it myself,
What's
right?
that?
Where my wife and I, we try to make things as easy as possible for our kids.
Right.
Like we
Yeah.
figure that if we can make it so that they do things right the first time,
Yeah.
all the time, that they'll move faster and move forward more quickly. You're
Yeah.
telling me that that's probably not a good idea.
Yeah, I
Yes.
am telling you that.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Just the opposite, all right?
So kids,
So I
if
guess
you're
I should
listening
stop
to this,
cutting my son's meat.
How old is your son?
15.
Yeah.
I'm joking. He's nowhere near 15, but yeah.
Well, my youngest son is 15, and all my kids, if you're listening right now,
It's over.
Yeah, you officially are all on your own. Congratulations. Good luck.
Right, it's over, baby.
Go work it out.
So speaking of kids and that, and along with learning, so I read this. Oh God, I think it was Scientific American, but it was talking about play as the most important
Yes.
thing that children can do. That
Yes.
parents are spending all this money to put their kids in these incredible programs, and the truth is, if you want your kid to be smart, to learn better, and to be socially adjusted in such a way that they can prosper in school, the best thing you can let them do all day is play. Is that true?
Yeah. Yes.
Well, hold on.
Because part of that play is actually reenacting things they see grown-ups do.
Yeah.
Okay.
And they are learning in the process.
But hold on. I have to seek clarification here.
Yeah.
Okay. So there is a way of there's a school of thought that thinks that piano lessons are play, right? And there's another school of thought that is, say, a Nintendo is play.
Mhm.
All right. So which one is actually play? Or are they both play? Or should we allow them to do both or allow them to choose which one and to do it as much as they want to? Like, should I let, for example, my child sit in front of the computer and play whatever game on the computer for 8 hours a day? Is that actually the right thing to do?
No, because that computer is not the real world. And
Did you hear that, my son? Did you hear that, my son?
Yeah. I'm going to have to isolate. I'm going to have to
I mean,
isolate that answer and put it on a loop.
8 hours a day is a bit much,
Okay,
okay. Yeah, but all things in moderation.
Okay.
to
So
some
play,
extent.
but of different kinds.
different
so
kinds
piano
of
lessons are
play.
okay, but not like
Varied.
at the expense of Nintendo or playing soccer or running out there and climbing trees or things like that.
Yeah, and
Right.
it's and sometimes as parents we look at our kids and we're like, "Oh, you're just messing around. Stop doing that."
Right.
But every once in a while, that messing around is play. And so maybe let them make a mess in your kitchen. My son,
Now, I'm going to let them make a mess in your kitchen.
we get these that's right. But we get these monthly science boxes,
Mhm,
and I'm like trying to give my son these science experiments to do, and then he's like, "No, give me all the boxes." And he takes all the things out of all the boxes
Yep.
and puts them all together, and I'm like, "Just okay, that's fine.
Right.
Just
Oh.
you're gonna help me clean up when you're done."
Okay, we're going to wrap up this part of the show, but we will be right back with Dr. Kiki Sanford and Chuck Nice and with more about the brain and technology. Stay tuned. Co-hosting today is, of course, comedian Chuck Nice.
Hey.
Hey. And joining us as before is, what a great pleasure to have her, neurophysiologist and science education specialist, science educator? I don't know. We'll call it. Dr. Kiki Sanford, thank you so much for coming.
Thank you.
Really, really appreciate it.
Yeah,
and I want to
glad
go.
be here.
Yeah, I want to circle back a little bit to what your research was years ago on bird memory. I think that's really interesting, and of course, we humans have memories as well. Do bird memories and human memories form the same way, and are they approximately the same complexity? That would be the question that I have, because we imagine that birds are bird-brained and therefore not as cool as we humans, but are they?
No. So if anyone calls you a bird brain, take it as a compliment.
Excellent.
Yay.
Because
my
bird
father was
brains-
right.
That's right. They do so much with less
Yeah.
neuronal material.
Wow.
Right? They have amazing behaviors. Their brains aren't nearly what we would consider as complex as ours
Right.
are. But so interestingly about memory, I was involved in a study with my PI, Dr. Clayton,
Yes.
looking at the Western scrub jay. Now, the
Okay.
Western scrub jay is a food storing bird.
Okay.
Ah.
And they just want to take anything and go hide it somewhere,
Mhm.
and then they're going to go back to it and
Oh, wow.
survive
Kind of like
off
pack
it.
rats,
Yes.
but not mammals.
And so there's scatter hoarders
Uh-huh.
and larder hoarders. Larder
Oh.
hoarders put them all the eggs in
Right,
one
one
basket.
place.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Right.
And the Western scrub jays are scatter hoarders,
Oh,
where they
that's
put
it.
them in lots of different places.
I
Very
gotta
cool.
tell you, son, diversification. That's what you need.
Yeah. and
Don't
so-
put all your food
Get
in
up
one
there.
basket.
And so we wanted to know if these birds had something like an episodic type memory, which humans, we have episodic memory. Like I could
Yes.
ask you what you had for breakfast and you could respond, I had cereal for breakfast, but you can also go back to that memory and remember the experience of sitting at your kitchen table and what it was like
Oh.
this morning, the
Uh-huh.
time, the place, the scent, the sounds, all of the contextual cues that make up that memory episode.
Nice.
God, I'm even
Right?
more hungry.
For cereal?
Back to food again.
Jeez. You're killing me, Kiki.
It's almost dinner time, I swear. So these birds, we were able to arrange a storing situation
Oh.
where we gave them unique trays that had big Duplo blocks Legos all over them
Wow.
in unique configurations. So they all looked different. And then we gave them two different kinds of food, yummy wax worms that go
Ah.
bad really fast. And we gave them dog food kibble, which it sustains you and it also sustains itself. It can last much longer.
Wow.
And we wanted to know whether the birds could remember what they stored, where, and when.
Oh.
And we
The answer is
yes,
they could.
They
They
could.
can.
Fantastic.
Wow.
I
Yep.
can't even remember.
Right.
I mean, I think last week I dug out an old Milky Way bar from my desk. It's been there
look
since
at
like the
that.
20th century. Ew. I ate it, of course. But that's a whole different story.
Wouldn't it
Okay.
be funny if you actually found that the reason why these birds can do this is somewhere there's like a room full of these birds wearing like accountant's visors and just taking notes. Just
That's right.
like,
That's right.
Give us your report. Where'd you put your
Reporting
food?
Wow. So,
Wow.
so what about false memories or inaccurate memories or manufactured memories? I mean, we, for example, we humans can think of something that we sure happened, but
Mhm.
actually didn't.
Yes.
Or assemble different things together and we are positive, for
Right.
example, that aliens have abducted us, right? When it is almost completely certain that almost
did not.
all of those
No,
alien
and they did not.
abductions did not happen.
But it
How
is
does-
very real to that person.
That's
Yes.
right. It's
that
as
person
if
Absolutely.
would that person would
That's
pass a lie detector
right.
test.
And so we don't want to disparage anybody that truly believes
Right.
it,
Exactly.
but it's clearly not happened. Can you tell us a little
Yeah.
bit about that phenomenon?
Yeah. So, I mean, what happens in the brain when you imagine something? It is lighting up all the areas of the brain that would light up if it were really happening.
wow.
Amazing.
So, and then there was a study that just came out. They put people in this functional magnetic resonance imaging machine and
Okay.
had them imagine certain music,
Mhm.
and they
Maybe a song by Drake.
Yes. Right.
KK, do you love me?
Uh-huh.
There you go.
Right, of course.
and when they had people actually listening to music and imagining they were listening to music and were scanning their brains the whole time, the brains looked identical.
But
My
isn't that
gosh.
cheating
Yeah.
because your inner ear actually has mechanisms to play music back to your brain, right?
Oh, I didn't know that.
yes,
yeah.
yeah. So the auditory
So it's-
cortex,
yeah.
and
I mean, I'm saying that's kind of cheating because when you think of a song, you're not just thinking of a song.
You're listening to it in your
head.
Wow.
That's what I'm saying.
But
that's exactly what happened.
So in other
But
words,
that's also physiological because that's linked to your ear and the auditory portion of your brain.
right. So it's a feedback loop.
It's
Not
a
only
feedback loop,
is had your brain or had your ear heard something that went to your brain
Brain
can
is
now
now
send
send it
something
back
out
to
to
your
your ear
ear.
and make you think that you're hearing something.
Right.
That's amazing. So it seems.
But I'm saying, does the same thing happen sympathetically if I were? Well, I guess you could say it's the same thing if it's your eye, then it's your visual cortex at that
Right.
point.
Right.
So maybe
Sure.
So
that's
if
what
you were to,
okay,
if
no,
you were to
think of
close
this.
your eyes right now and imagine
it. I'm seeing
seeing
it.
something,
Right.
your visual cortex
Cortex.
would light up in the same way as if you were actually
okay,
seeing
now
it.
wait. So here's what I really want to know, because this is to me the big payoff.
Uh-huh.
If I imagine a painful situation in the fMRI,
Yeah.
does the part of my brain that registers pain light up? Because now there's no pain happening at all. There's no sensory perception of pain. There's no physical stimuli of pain. Does that happen?
It would light up, maybe not as strongly as if it were actually activated
Okay.
by the somatosensory system.
Oh, it would with
But
me
the-
because I'm a big
area,
baby.
but if you imagined yourself being touched or a painful stimulus, then the part of the brain that is responsible for that stuff, touch,
Right.
would
That
light up,
lights up.
would
Amazing.
be
That's-
So,
activated.
so that's
Yeah.
phenomenal. Well, that's
Yeah.
so a hallucination, for example, right?
Mhm.
Whether it's formed by drugs or whatever.
All right.
For
Yeah.
is literally a brain thing causing your eyes to think it sees something.
Yes.
That's
Because the majority of our vision is in our brain
wow.
Right.
anyway.
So you can
Right.
imagine.
Like actually, you can't even see what you're actually seeing because there's too
Exactly.
much information there to be seen.
Our brain is
So your
filtering the
brain-
world for
Wow.
Yeah.
us.
Or if it were numbers, your brain would be interpolating the numbers
So
because you can't actually
Wow.
take in all that information at once.
So taken in the
Yeah.
other direction, if you had a few memories that were real, but didn't know like the whole story, you might fill it in,
You
and
fill
then
in the blanks.
and it would become so real
Yeah.
to you that it were a real memory.
Yeah, exactly.
Amazing.
Absolutely.
Exactly.
And this is kind of how memory is malleable. We
Right.
know that if you're remembering something, your brain is activated.
Right.
Those synapses that are involved in the memory are firing
Right.
and active. And this is there's a lot of therapeutic work right now trying to treat things like PTSD
Yes.
and other mental disorders where you're behaviorally affected, where if you try to relive something in your mind, but then add additional contextual aspects to it by
Yes.
imagining them or even just doing something different
right.
while you're remembering it,
Wow.
it can change the memory to one that maybe
Is not
was
as
fearful
traumatic.
and goes from traumatic to not as traumatic.
Wow.
They're doing
Yeah.
that with phobias as well.
Absolutely,
Same
yes.
same therapy with phobias.
Wow.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right about memories being malleable because for the longest time, I had memories of my parents actually just being a single white man who was very rich on Park Avenue. And me and my little brother went to live
Okay.
with him.
Uh-huh.
And then it turns out that, I don't know.
No, that
It was
that
a
was
good
real.
movie.
Yeah, it was a good movie. It was a pretty good sitcom too, if you ask yourself.
Right
But,
there, yeah. Movie, sitcom.
different
it's
strokes for
done.
different folks, you know. Sorry. Oh no, that is so interesting, and well, I think that's a
Yeah.
perfect segue. Let's go into another cosmic query. shall we?
All right, here we go. This is Calumet Constant. Oh, sorry, not Call Me Constantine.
There we go.
Now I think we've figured out what the problem is when I read names. It's just the way.
This memory
my
will stick
brain
with you
works.
It's
for a
just-
long time. Yeah.
It's that eyeball to mouth
Eyeball-to-mouth
connection. Not so
Totally,
good.
totally screwed. Okay, here we go. Call me Constantine, and I will. From Instagram says, why do I always forget important things, but remember useless things?
Wow.
Gus Veza Delanos is his real name. Call me Constantine.
Yeah. Kiki, take that.
Well, really often those less important things, you're probably experiencing them a lot. Repetition is huge in memory and in the way memories can exist for long periods of time.
Mm-hmm.
Repeat it, and you're just going to remember it. You know, you're going to remember that jingle from whatever advertisement from, when you were 12 years old.
Plop, plop, fizz, fizz.
Right? Your whole life, because you saw it so many times,
Right.
and it's a catchy tune. And it maybe also incorporates multiple contextual cues.
Right.
So that advertisement, there was color, there was sound, you're experiencing it
You
in
were
a certain
sitting
way.
in the living room in a happy time, hanging out,
right.
drinking hot chocolate.
Yeah. And so those multiple cues can also strengthen a memory.
Right.
And so, like, say, if you're studying for a test, it's often suggested that you can smell certain scents while you're studying. And then if you take that scent with you to the test, it'll help you recall what you learned while you were studying.
Is that really science?
Yes.
Yes.
That's really true?
Yes.
Oh, my
That is
God.
It
why.
helps.
That's why I
Wow.
always pass gas when I'm studying.
Oh, no. No.
It makes test day
No.
makes test day a little challenging for the other test takers. Not saying I'm popular on test day, but hey.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. But it's that important stuff. You might say, I need to remember that. But it's, whatever it is some phone number written down on a piece of paper.
Wow.
And
Wow.
you looked at it once. You didn't do the things that will help you remember that important piece of information.
Now, what about associations? Does that help as well? Because
Absolutely.
Okay, yeah.
Yes.
Because I like it's very funny. Like you, if you meet someone who's very attractive, for some reason you remember their name.
You sure?
I'm just saying.
Well,
Unless you're me, and then I'm like, 5 seconds later, who are you? What?
Okay. Well, okay.
No.
So Kiki, tell us what is a memory that has lasted for you as far as sort of your scientific story goes, like your life. What is a memory? Like, was it a research event, like holding that scrub jay that one time, or was it like defending your dissertation, or was it, what's a memory that lasts in your mind, given the fact that you're like a memory meister?
Right. So one other reason memories last are emotional aspects, right? Like you mentioned, a happy time or a stressful time or whatever. So defending my dissertation definitely was one of the more stressful events in my life.
Really?
And I was ready for defending, going through my oral exams. I've got the panel of 4 professors who are quizzing me on neurophysiology and all this scientific knowledge that I was supposed to have gained. And I remember, just internally freaking out and externally trying to be calm, cool, and collected. And then they took a break for a body function break. And one of the professors comes and taps me on the shoulder, and I'm like, "Oh, you're doing fine. You're doing really great. I just want to let you know that your fly is down."
Wow.
An hour and a half of standing in front of these people who are gonna decide my future.
Oh my God.
And I'm like,
oh, jeez.
Oh, no. So now did that
that memory stuck.
Yeah. But I was going to say that could do one or two things. That could either disarm the situation completely and just like, well, I got nothing to lose now, or like it's over. I don't care anymore. I don't give a damn about anything.
Done.
Or
Put a fork in me.
or it could kind of cripple you with like fear and embarrassment. What did it do to you? What was the emotional response to that?
I had a moment of crippling fear and embarrassment, and then I tried to overcome it. Deep breathing. I've got a couple of minutes. Let's get back in there.
And it worked out. It worked out clearly.
Worked out.
Yes. So was it indeed an adversarial sort of experience? And I'm trying to knit this back to our conversation earlier about education. Was this dissertation defense something that you felt was educationally worthwhile? Or was it just sort of like an evaluative hoop that you had to jump through that sort of gives you your union card as a scientist when really, PhD is just 3 letters after your name. It doesn't really say whether you're a better human being or not.
No, but I think that the process of getting your PhD, part of it is training you to be a teacher and training you to pass on the information that you've learned to other people.
Interesting.
And so I think that process of studying and focusing on the information and making sure I really knew it, that was valuable for me. And I think it is valuable to the PhD institution as a whole, because it is a hoop to jump through for sure.
Yeah.
It was not in the least adversarial. Everyone was supportive and kind and wanted me to do a good job.
I see.
It's just the stress you put on yourself, right?
I see.
But am I going to?
Thank you again for coming and bringing your expertise about neurophysiology and also education to us. Where can we find you in the Twitterverse?
I am at Durkiki, DRKIKI, Dr. Kiki.
Oh, okay.
Yes,
all right.
Dr. Kiki.
All
and
right.
on Instagram, it's the Dr. Kiki.
Ooh,
because somebody.
There's another one.
Because there's another Kiki
There's,
doctor.
there's obviously another one. Someone took it before me. So
Well, lucky other
The
Dr.
Dr.
Kiki. That's
Kiki.
right. And Chuck Nice, you can be reached in the Twitterverse at
Chuck Nice Comic everywhere.
Chuck Nice Comic everywhere. Okay.
Look me up.
Yeah, and everyone is always welcome to find me at Chuck Liu, Liu. Of course, I tweet like 3 times a year, so that might not be particularly fruitful, but please feel free to be in touch with all of us, and especially this wonderful information about the brain, both bird and human, that Dr. Kiki Sanford is giving us right now. So,
you know what? Before we go, I have something I want to know.
sure.
And both of you can help me with this.
Yeah.
So there was a question, I can't find it right now, but it said, can neuroscience be used in the development of AI? And
artificial intelligence. Brilliant.
But with that, here's what I want to ask, okay? And you can explain this. There's the theory that things can only get so small,
Right.
and then they're not efficient anymore. You can't get any smaller.
That's right.
Right? So with that in mind, when you talk about how we can more efficiently distribute information coming out of microchips, is it possible to structure the computer the way we structure, or the way our brains are structured, which in science fiction, Chuck, that would be like the positronic brain.
For example,
of
Lieutenant
Data.
Commander
Lieutenant
Data.
Commander
That's
Data.
right. Mm-hmm. And Star
So,
Trek.
one, what is that theory that I can't remember right now? Is that about the getting smaller and smaller? And then, Kiki, if you can we actually make a positronic?
Let's just go right to Kiki.
Yes!
Answer this point. Go for it.
Researchers are working on this, and it's so exciting. So the computer is a bad analogy for the brain at this point. So computer circuits, they can process or store.
Right.
They cannot do both
at the same time.
simultaneously, right? The human brain does it simultaneously. We are like the most massively parallel processed and storage device in our Jello head, right?
Jello head.
Jello head. But there is a new bit of technology that IBM researchers came up with it. It's called the memristor.
Memristor.
The memristor.
Whoa.
It is a new component to electrical circuits. And the potential of it is neat in that it can store its old state and return to it
anytime.
And so the idea,
fantastic.
People have been excited about, number one, is this will, it'll cut down on the shutdown and boot up time on your computers, right? Our phones, everything will instantanaous because it'll remember
It'll go
where
right
it was.
to the remembered state.
Researchers just recently published a new nanoscale memristor circuit.
Oh.
It's a nanowire. It's based on a nanowire, little wire that I can't remember which elements are used in the system, but it's a tiny memristor, and they were able to get it to process and store simultaneously and take electrical current, and they think that they'll be able to start networking it with other nanowires.
Oh my gosh.
sometime
Oh
soon.
my
And that's
gosh.
their next step.
Here
and
we go.
and
Here
so
we go.
I honestly think we are on the brink of having the technology to be able to do this. So
Wow.
yeah.
Positronic brain is
you
going to
go.
happen.
There you go.
we're right on the cusp of it.
Now, is artificial intelligence, because we have only a partial understanding of our brains, more likely to suffer from deficiencies, things that we might consider, like, might they be more likely to be psychotic? Like, Skynet, for example, who decides that the only way it can survive is to destroy all of humanity.
Sweet.
Yeah.
Is there a concern there?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, any technology is only as good as its parts, right? As what it's made up of. Also, artificial intelligence is only as good as its programming,
Right.
as its instructions. And now with artificial intelligence, we're using learning and memory,
Right.
what we understand from human learning and memory, to teach these artificial intelligent
Fascinating.
networks so that they're basically failing and coming
Right.
up with new solutions and learning on their own how to
Right.
solve a problem.
But their intelligence has to emerge, just
Their-
as you described earlier
Yes.
in this episode,
Yes.
right? So that emergence could be even better.
It could be
than
even
what we
better.
are, or even worse, or just
Right.
different, right? I mean,
It'll be different for sure. So, something that makes us who we are is the fact that we are a brain in a body that interacts with the environment.
Exactly.
And so the environment influences us. We
We
influence
influence
the
the
environment, right? AI is it's an intelligence in a box,
Right.
There is no
There's
other
no-
than the input that is put in.
Yeah.
There is nothing else, and
Right.
so it is a very different system to
Wow.
ourselves.
So
would there be, is there a benefit then to marrying that technology to a corporeal
Body.
entity that
Right.
interacts with the elements around it or
Right.
the environment around it?
If we want it to be more human-like intelligence, I think that would be
that we should build a human-like body
Right.
around it.
right, because otherwise it's going to be very alien
Right.
Wow.
in its type of intelligence.
Lieutenant Commander Data, we're coming.
Wow.
We're on our way.
We're
Don't
on our
worry. But that brings the whole concept of normal. What is normal intelligence? What is typical? What should we think is okay? What is not okay? I think that's things that come right up now.
Well, that brings us to a cosmic query.
Oh, terrific! Go for it, Jeff.
You actually kind of right in this wheelhouse. This is Davy Jones.
The one with the locker or the one with the monkeys?
Actually, neither, because he spells it D-A-Y.
Oh, okay.
What fact concerning individuals who suffer from mental health issues do you wish the public was more informed about? So, what are the aspects of mental health issues that everybody should know?
Well, first, it's invisible, and so you might think people are fine, they're normal, but they could be suffering, and so that is one of the very first things to understand, that there is an invisible aspect.
Okay.
Right.
But what about the whole concept of illness? Now, what counts as being mentally ill and what doesn't, right? I mean, when we think of physical illness, we see it a little bit better.
Yeah, there's so many medical protocols that let you know that you're sick, and your body
Your body.
lets you know that you're sick.
But I think our medical community is ill able to address many mental health issues. I mean, if you go into a hospital with a brain issue, they'll check to make sure that your body is working fine.
Oh, weird.
If you have a serious concussion, for instance, as long as your body is fine, they'll send you home. But you could still be suffering the effects of that concussion, which involves memory loss, disorientation, behavioral changes, all sorts of problems that are really going to affect the quality of your life. But they send you right home because your body is fine.
Oh, that's really rough.
That's interesting.
And then the idea of, what counts as being ill, right? The terms of learning disabilities, right? Or anything like that. We consider someone disabled physically, for example, if they can't walk or something. But should we, right? Because with proper assistive technology, not being able to walk doesn't mean anything. You can live a perfectly productive and valuable life. Stephen Hawking could barely move any muscles in his whole body for most of his life.
Well, he was something special.
Right,
I mean,
that's a very special circumstance. But
the stuff he could do in his head, my goodness.
But the idea of disability in general, let's say our kids being diagnosed correctly or incorrectly with, I don't know, ADD or whatever, is that D, the second D, they're disordered? Is that really fair? Is there a distinction medically, scientifically, between someone with a disorder and someone with, say, just a short attention span?
Right. Yeah. So there is, the DSM. It's I forget it's a manual that has all of the psychological disorders and disabilities and the scores, basically, for how you decide whether somebody falls into a certain category. So we have, this Bible of sorts for determining a state of a person. But there are so many factors that go into play here. And sometimes things like an ADD or ADHD diagnosis, in one situation, it will be looked at as a disorder and could be a disability and could be looked down on or negatively perceived. However, in another situation, it's going to get your child treatment and special services in a school system that maybe otherwise would ignore them.
Yeah.
So there are these pros and cons and it's such a hard place because we are not set up to deal with mental issues.
Chuck and I were discussing this a little earlier too. There is a study that came out recently of just school children who were born a little earlier compared to a little later in a school year. And it turns out the students who were born a month earlier were many percent more likely to be diagnosed at ADD in a classroom or ADHD than the older child. And it's only because they're just younger, not because they're deficient or disordered. It's kind of scary that way, right?
In a way, yeah. I mean, unless they were right about me. That's it's unfortunate. That's all I can say. But
well, they were right about me too, but,
they were like, I'm sorry, Mrs. Nice, something is wrong with your son. And they were right.
But, what is wrong, right? Nowadays...
It's a slippery... It's slippery. There are gray zones everywhere.
Is that because much of what we call mental illness happens on a spectrum?
Yes.
Yeah.
And very often you're dealing with a spectrum of things, symptoms that could be explaining a variety of things. It's like, autism spectrum disorder. Schizophrenia is actually a spectrum.
Oh, wow.
There are many genetic and environmental factors that go into play. It depends on what neurotransmitters are being affected in a particular way. What area of the brain even is affected.
So in some cases, you can have the same disorder or the same condition,
but a completely different underlying reason.
An
underlying cause.
And you have to treat it differently, and therefore you have in one case it could affect your quality of life unless it gets treated, and in another case it might not have to. You just have to make adjustments and be aware and knowledgeable.
Or you could just become a comedian.
Hey,
because that's what everybody in my business does.
That's one of the ways you cope, right? If you choose what you do based on what you love and what you're able to, then that's as good a solution as any kind of other intervention that you might imagine.
No,
it's all about deflecting, right? It's like, I'll make you laugh before you get too close.
Hey, let me tell you something. Hang out with a room full of comedians. You will not be entertained. That is all I can say.
That's so unfortunate. Okay, we're just about running out of time, but Kiki, I want to give... Oh, come on. It's just been such a pleasure, but I wanted to give you the last word, a few seconds. Is there something cool that you'd like to tell us about the brain or even its connection with the universe or your personal ideas about that? I mean, this is your moment. Go for it.
Oh, wow. Yeah. So, I think it's very important for us all to consider that we are this expression of our brains, and our brain is filtering our world for us, that we are about a quarter of a second behind our brain, actually, that the brain is kind of building our world for us out of the information it deems important to us. And so what we think is going on
Might not
might
be.
not be.
Ooh.
And so this links up to the whole cosmic perspective
Yeah.
out there. You
Uh-huh.
know, what is really going on
Wow.
in the universe? It's
Certain.
bigger than we are.
Fantastic. Something
you
for us
go.
to definitely chew on. Okay, well, as much as I must regret doing this, we're going to wrap this up and say to everyone, thank you for listening to Talk All Stars. Thank you, Chuck Nice.
Such a pleasure.
Really appreciate it.
Always love being
Dr.
with you.
Kiki Sanford, thank you so much.